No sewing machine? No problem. I will walk you through the process as I demonstrate the stitches, skills, and quick tips you will need to easily hand sew an Olson mask approved for hospital use. This tutorial is intended for brand new sewers who don't own a machine, or for those who would like a quick refresher course in hand sewing and a guide along the way. I have linked the pattern in the description below. Stick with me, and at the end of this tutorial, you'll have a completed mask. Download the Olson Masks pattern that I have linked below. You will need all the pieces that are labeled with a 1. Make sure you measure the gauge block and it should correctly measure 1 inch. Lay out your fabric in the correct direction. If you have directional fabric, such as logos or words, you will want to make sure that they are facing up. Fold your fabric from left to right so that the logos and words are still maintaining the correct direction. Lay out your pattern pieces, also going in the same correct direction. I pinned my pattern pieces to my fabric between the dotted line and the cut edge. This will be the seam allowance and should not affect the integrity of your fabric later. I cut out my pieces with fabric scissors. For the face, I used a contrasting fabric. This is the fabric piece that will be seen from the outside, so you'll want to think about the fabric that you most enjoy. I took out my pins, and now we are ready to prepare our pieces to make a mask. To help you sew a straight seam, mark the seam line on the wrong side of each of the mouth and cheek pieces. Put a pencil dot in each fabric corner 1/4 inch away from both edges. Lay your paper pattern between the dots and trace the outline of the pattern. Also mark the curved seam of the wrong side of only one face piece. Depending on your fabric color, you may need to use a colored pencil or chalk in order to see your line. Next, we will fold back and press a little hem on the straight edge of the mouth and cheek pieces as indicated in the directions. If your pieces are still as they were cut with right sides together, just fold down 1/4 inch on the top layer. Pick up and pinch back an equal amount on the bottom layer. Use your fingers to crease a line. Mark a seam line halfway between the cut edge and the fold on each piece. If you have a choice of needles, use a short and thin needle with a small eye. If possible, choose a thread color that is similar to your fabric. To easily thread the needle, drape the thread over the needle point. Pinch it between your thumb and first finger tightly and slide it off the tip. Push the eye of the needle over the thread and pull it through. Make sure you have at least a 6-inch tail. It's that easy. Cut your thread about an arm's length from the needle. To make an easy and secure knot, overlap the cut end of the thread and the point of the needle and hold that cut end with your needle. Lightly wrap the end of the thread around the needle several times. Slowly slide the wraps over the eye of the needle and down the thread until it knots. You now have prepared a needle for sewing. Notice the thread is doubled only part way to the knot. You will always be stitching with the single thread portion. Adjust the thread tail so that it easily stays in the eye of the needle and isn't anchored into the seam. First, sew the little hems that are creased with a small running stitch. Push your needle point through the end of your marked seam line on the hem you pressed through both layers of fabric, and then immediately push it back up through both pieces of fabric. Push it down and up again on the line. When your fabric has a few stitches run onto the needle, pull your needle through until your knot is secure. Pull your thread snugly, but not so tight that your fabric puckers. Your hand should always pull thread on the top side of the fabric. You will run your needle down and up through the fabric multiple times until you wish to pull the needle and thread through. Make sure you do not accidentally anchor the thread tail into your seam. Just shorten the tail by pulling the needle further toward the cut thread end. Keep your stitches small. You want your fabric to stay securely together. If the stitches are too large, you will leave holes in your seams. If you find that your stitches are too big, simply unthread your needle and pull them out and redo those. Tie a knot. Slip your needle under the last stitch and pull it most of the way through to create a loop. Slip your needle through the loop and pull snugly. Repeat that 1 or 2 more times to make a secure knot. To hide your thread tail, push your needle between the fabric layers in the seam allowance and then up again. Pull and cut your thread. Once you adjust the knot, the tail end will disappear into the fabric. Sew all 4 folded hems on the cheek and mouth pieces using a running stitch. I sewed 2 with red and 2 with tan thread so you could see the difference a good choice of thread color makes. Next, sew the curved seams of the face and mouth using a backstitch. With right sides of your fabric together, bring your prepared needle up from the back to the front about 1/16 of an inch from the end of the marked seam line. Pull the thread through until the knot catches. Go down to the right through all layers of fabric at 1/16 of an inch or so and come up to the left of the thread tail about 1/16 from the first thread. Pull the thread through until it is snug, but not puckered. Go back to the last stitch and come up equal distance to the left. You never need to put your hand to the back of your fabric. These small stitches will produce a stable seam that will keep your pieces firmly together. If you mysteriously end up with a knot like this as you work, just put your needle in the loop and pull it tight around your needle. Take your needle out and keep pulling. The knot, called a slip knot, will pop out and disappear, so you may continue. The back side of the backstitch will look a little different than the front. As you can see here, a backstitch produces a nice tight seam suitable for any seams that will have pressure applied to them. If you run short on thread, you will need to securely knot and cut your thread before you prepare another needle and continue. To do that, you will need about 6 inches of thread left. Slip your needle under the last stitch to complete the line of thread. Slip your needle under the same stitch so a small loop of thread is visible. Put the needle through the loop and pull the loop snugly. This creates a little knot. Do this again in the same place to create a secure knot. Trim your thread close to the knot, but do not clip the knot. Complete both the curved seams of the face and mouth using a backstitch. Right here where the mouth and face pieces curve the most, we want to cut 3 little triangles out of the seam allowance. This cuts excess fabric out of the mask and allows the pieces to lay flatter with less bulk. With all the separate pieces prepared, we can assemble the mask. Turning the mouthpiece right side out, line up the notched noses. Nest the mouthpiece firmly inside a face piece with right sides of the fabric together and matching the seams at the top near the nose and the bottom near the chin. Near the nose, turn both seam allowances to the right and pin them together inside the seam allowance. On the chin, turn the seam allowances in opposite directions and pin inside the seam allowance. Smooth out the face and match up a cheek piece with the right side of the fabric toward the face piece so it completely matches the face on 3 sides. If the first cheek piece you choose doesn't line up perfectly, replace it with the other cheek piece, which should fit beautifully. Pin the hems and face together. Turn the other cheek and repeat. Use a backstitch to sew around the perimeter of the mask. If you really want this to go fast, you could definitely get away with a small running stitch, but make sure you don't skip the top stitch step at the end. Here I took one little stitch to get started and then moved into a back stitch for the rest of the seam. Stitch all the way to the corner and then continue carefully around the corner. Knot and snip thread and begin with a new thread as necessary. Clip off the corners, making sure you do not clip through the seam. This clip will give you much nicer looking corners. You may also clip off the little triangles of fabric that were created when you folded over the little hems. Going inside the pocket, turn the cheek inside out and use a blunt yet pointy object to help push out the corners. Make sure you do not pierce your fabric. Going in the same side of the pocket, turn the rest of the mask inside out and gently push out the corners. Finger press all along the seam. Top stitch your mask using a running stitch as you did before all around the perimeter of the mask about 1/16 of an inch away from the edge. I started by placing my knot inside the pocket so it would not be seen on the front or the back of the mask. To do this, I put my needle in the pocket and pierced through the fabric in the corner. I pulled the thread until the knot was firmly anchored inside the pocket right in the corner. I then began a running stitch around the mask. With the face up, sew through all the layers of your fabric, keeping the layers of fabric neatly together. At the points where there are more layers of fabric, you may find it easier to work a single stitch or even a half stitch at a time. For the best look, keep your stitches small and use the best matching thread color for the face fabric. I used a contrasting color on the face so you could see it more clearly for demonstration purposes. Work around, knotting and starting new thread as needed. Sew a wire sleeve with a running stitch. To do this, prepare a needle and hide your knot in the pocket of the mask. Sew a running stitch about 1 inch either side of the center seam. I used a piece of tape to mark a line. I sewed just outside the tape and then removed the tape. Secure the knot on the back of the mask. Again, after you make a knot, run your thread under the layer of fabric and up again before snipping the thread. With a little adjustment, the thread tail will disappear inside the mask. Cut a piece of wire about 6 or 7 inches long or craft pipe cleaner doubled over and slip it inside the wire sleeve. Mold this to your nose and cheekbones. Sew elastic channels with a running stitch. You may fold over as much or as little of the cheek as you would like to make your mask fit well across your nose, cheekbones, jawline, and chin. You may want to consider stitching an uneven amount to get the best fit. Hide your knots inside the fabric fold on both ends of this seam. Thread in some elastic cut to a comfortable length or other material to go over your ears. Turn the knot to the inside of the channel. Repeat this for the other ear. Download my no-sew filter pattern linked below the description and watch my accompanying video which explains filter fabric and fitting the filter inside the Olson mask pocket. Please like, share, and subscribe. I love to hear your success stories and try to answer most questions. With a little skill, you can kindly and proudly wear your mask.